Hello, and welcome to the Bay Friendly Garden Month talk on gardening with children. If you'd like to follow along with the slides, here is a short URL that will allow you to access all of the hyperlinked resources within the slides. So go ahead and check it out. My name is Carrie Strohl. I'll be your presenter today, and I am the voice behind the slides and the founder and leader of the School Garden Doctor, a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering teachers, schools, and communities to grow school gardens that enhance science education, nurture wellness, and foster environmental literacy. And I'm very happy to be here with you today. Nothing promotes sustainability more than teaching the next generation. And luckily, there are many other reasons that it's beneficial to get kids in the garden. Gardening with kids sparks curiosity, which is a hallmark of scientific thinking. It also encourages them to get dirty and connects them with nature, which we all know is great for our overall health. And finally, it definitely promotes creative thinking through projects and through play. But there also can be a couple of challenges to gardening with children. For one, they're young, so their age can sometimes be a challenge in finding developmentally appropriate activities. Their differing abilities, they're just learning how to use their bodies, so tools and materials are not always suited to their abilities. And finally, their attention spans. They are young, and so they don't necessarily have the full attention that adults sometimes have. But this talk is designed to get you thinking about some really exciting ways, simple ways to get kids active in the garden. And let's start with a story about getting outside. This story is about my neighbor's son. Ever since he could walk, he's been obsessed with trucks. I'm sure you know a kid just like this, especially garbage trucks. He has a special pajamas that he would wear on the eve of trash collection day, and he and his mom would walk around the neighborhood stocking the trucks. And now he and his little sister actually take the waste bins to the curb for us. And I'm starting to think I should tip him or something. The point of this story is, as adults, we never look forward to completing this chore every Tuesday on our own. But to this child, this is a super fun time. So I'd like you to think for a moment about the last time you spent time outside. What did you do? Now think for a few seconds about the last time the kids in your life spent time outside. What were they most interested in doing? Chances are you have different answers. And this is something that Emma Biggs, the author of the only known to me book by a kid for adults, is that kids are not grown-ups. Um, she highlights that kids have very different ideas about what to do in a garden space, whereas adults really want the space to be tidy and look good for other adults. She has a whole list of things that kids like to do in the garden that grown-ups don't always want them to be doing. For example, stepping on plants, digging for holes, picking unripe fruit. So the goals of this session are to share important tips for engaging children in garden-based learning and describe some simple, fun, and low-cost activities for kids of all ages. The most important takeaway is asking kids. Ask for kids' ideas. And I did this recently. What kinds of features did kids most appreciate in a garden? And these are some of the things they said. Messy paths, interesting edible plants, a living wall, flowers, but not super pretty flowers because then they'll all get picked. Places to sit, bug houses, a fairy garden, succulents, and plants with really interesting or crazy names. So they do have ideas. So when I think about kid-friendly gardening, I can distill it into a couple of things: plants, projects, and play, and fun, as well as seeds, trees, and weeds. And that will make the organization of this talk. I'll start with the top 10 plants for kids. Any plants that kids can engage with in a very multisensory, multimodal way are good plants for kids. I especially like plants that have names after animals. For example, I was recently with a 3-year-old daughter of one of my friends, and she correctly identified the plant in the left-hand side as lamb's ear. I mean, look at it. It just looks like a little lamb ear, and it's fuzzy as well. The middle one is kangaroo paw, and on the right-hand side is the plant called lion tail. So these kinds of plants are really interesting to kids. So thinking about having plants that they can easily name and plants that look really interesting and resemble other things that they know about in the world. Any kind of herbs are always fun for kids, and I especially like these salvias, starting with many salvias, some just even the common culinary sages, but also Jerusalem sage, which is the yellow flower here that can be pulled out of its whorl, and kids, you can see in this picture, are drinking the nectar right out of it, just like a straw. And I really love pineapple sage as well. Not only does it have these long tubular flowers that hummingbirds adore, but the leaves smell just like pineapple. And other kinds of herbs are fun as well. So on this page, you see some chives planted in a pot that looks like a head, lavender for making lavender wands, rosemary for doing cuttings with kids. You just snip a piece of lavender, strip the bottom leaves off, and dip it in water until it grows roots, and then you can plant a whole new lavender plant. Some annuals that I really like. We can go through the ABCs of flowers. This here shows just alyssum, borage, and calendula, but I could go on and name a flower for every letter of the alphabet. And then, of course, we want for kids to have food items that they like. And there's nothing like pulling a fresh carrot from the earth. And of course, carrots go together with peas. And so you see kids here, they really love uniquely shaped fruits and vegetables. They like things that they can weigh, measure, and count. They like to compare the sizes and shapes of different things. And then, of course, you can bring in lots of nice literature selections that go along with some of these foods. Some of my favorite books are books that villainize vegetables, but in a really fun way. For example, How Martha Saved Her Parents from the Green Beans. If you haven't seen this book, it's a really fun book. I won't give away the ending. And Monsters Don't Eat Broccoli is a really cute book also. And I've had the pleasure of working with our local independent bookstore, the Napa Book Mine, on selecting lots of different books to provide to teachers so that they can promote different food literacy ideas in the classroom. Some of my favorite food items to grow include popcorn, pumpkins, and of course, other kinds of squash. What you see here are some girls shucking strawberry pink popcorn, which is in the bushel in the center picture. And you can do really fun things with popcorn. You can actually pop it and eat it, and then engage kids in sensory exploration of different spices and using different toppings on your popcorn. On the right-hand side, you see a friend of mine's grandson who grew giant pumpkins one year. And of course, potatoes. What you see in the bottom middle picture is our former First Lady, Michelle Obama, pulling a potato out of the ground. There's nothing more like treasure than harvesting potatoes. Kids adore it. Okay, that wasn't exactly 10, but you get the idea. There are categories of plants we call perennials and annuals, and here are just a couple of the names that I listed for you in the previous pictures. One more note that if you are growing both beans, corn, and squash, I encourage you to grow them together in a Three Sisters garden. You can find more information about that by clicking on the link. All right, so those were plants. Let's talk a little bit about projects. Projects are really great for encouraging birds, bees, and butterflies, any other kinds of pollinators and wildlife to your yard. And you can use just everyday materials, reusing and upcycling different boxes, cans, bottles, and things like that. Here are just a couple of examples. A candy dish that's no longer used being repurposed as a butterfly station for tasting fruits or for getting water. Old pieces of bamboo or logs drilled with the right size holes can be home for solitary bees, of which most of our native bees are. Most bees do not live in hives, they live in solitary tunnels, like the ones shown here. And even just building a little tiny house for ladybugs to hibernate in and for other bugs and insects to get into. Just a quick note, it is important to teach kids about what bugs are maybe harmful. So if you're making dark spaces, make sure you teach kids about how to identify and what to do if they see a black widow spider or something else that might be harmful. And finally, play. Play is the hallmark of getting kids outside and engaging them in the garden. So here are just a couple of ideas for play spaces. This is a DIY, probably repurposed palette flower stand. And what you see in the image are fake flowers. So this is a pretend play thing that could be done year round. But I would encourage you to also have real flowers that kids can then role play, being the florist, making bouquets, customer interaction, just pretending to own a flower shop would be great fun for them. Another idea is a sunflower house where you grow a lot of sunflowers all together in like an arc, grow more of them closely together than you normally would. Oh, and then bend them over to each other to make kind of like a little cave or hiding place. You can see there's a blanket and probably a great place to snuggle up with some books. Anything that you can save seeds and then sow those seeds again is really helpful for keeping your costs low, as well as for keeping kids engaged and understanding the life cycle of different plants. So you can have kids decorate seed packets, sort seeds based on different size, shape, and color. That's what's happening here in this egg carton. It'll keep kids occupied for a long, long time. Observe their shapes and sizes. This is a whole bin or box full of beans. Gross or fine motor practice, taking sunflower seeds out of a giant seed head. This young lady identified this corn and thought it was just like the tooth she had just lost. So kids will make lots of connections, collecting seeds from all different kinds of plants you find in the yard, and spending time with them. And kids are really good at learning how to start seeds as well. It's, in fact, in this picture on the left, I have a second grade student teaching her teachers how to start seeds because she had been doing it for a long time. A couple of rules of thumb that are really helpful are to think about Goldilocks. Seeds, when starting them, they don't want to be too deep or too shallow. They don't want to be too dry or too wet. They don't want to be too warm or too cold. They have to be just right. So if you keep those things in mind, you can most certainly be successful starting seeds with kids. We use typically finger measurements or farmer measurements. So a seed should be buried no deeper than twice its size. So for a bean seed, really no deeper than about a half an inch to an inch. For kids, start with big seeds. For littlest kids, rather, start with big seeds first. So fava beans are a great seed to start off with. Using the right planting medium also will help. The picture in the bottom is an image of an activity that you can actually do with kids where they mix different materials to try and see what would be the just right soil planting mix for starting seeds. And then I definitely encourage you to oversow and then thin out the ones. So, plant more seeds than you think you'll need and then pull out the ones to make room for the ones you want to keep, and just experiment with it. Kids are very good at just thinking about, I wonder what will happen if. Okay, so let's transition into talking a little bit about trees. So I like to think of trees in two different categories: evergreen trees and deciduous trees. And again, keeping with the theme of things that are interesting to kids, things that attract a lot of wildlife, things that are, very low water or low maintenance, as well as things that kids can learn the names of. So a couple of evergreen trees I like are citrus, especially kumquats. They're very interesting to kids because you can eat the small fruits right off the tree with the skin on. An arbutus shrub is great for attracting birds, as is the feijoa, which is both edible to people and birds. They make these wonderful little interesting flowers, the leaves of which taste kind of like little marshmallow pillows. And then if they're left on the tree, they make a fruit called a pineapple guava. You may have had it. It's very interesting for kids to try as well. And some deciduous trees, I definitely encourage, if you're doing edible trees, to buy dwarf varieties to keep them small. So apples, pears, or pomegranates are all good choices, but keeping them small means that kids can participate in the harvesting. A Western redbud is a native plant that's very low water and makes this really cute little pink flower before it makes leaves. So it's kind of an interesting growth pattern. And then anything that attracts a lot of wildlife and provides a little bit of leaf litter for looking for critters on the ground later in its season, like an oak or a maple. And finally, there are always going to be weeds. Weeds are actually a sign of thriving in a garden. And if you teach kids to have fun with it, then they too will participate in the chore of removing weeds. And so, what we have here are some kids participating in Plant Olympics, which is where they use persistence, learn how to use new tools like a pitchfork, and try to get the longest taproot of a mallow plant, which is one of the most tenacious weeds in a garden. Or on the right-hand side, you see two girls who had been playing catchweed tag. Catchweed or bedstraw is a sticky, it's small and low growing, but it can make sticky seeds, and the leaves are sticky too. And so at a certain distance, you can safely throw them at each other and they will stick, and it can make a fun game of tag. And in this instance, kids even made signs saying, "No more catchweed." And finally, you can make things out of a lot of different weeds as well. So I have a blog post called "One Teacher and 12 Eco Kids Tackle the Calendula Challenge." I love calendula. I just mentioned it earlier as one that I love, a plant that I love. Oops, sorry. However, it has a weed variety as well that really is quite prolific in a garden if it takes hold. And that's a good time to mention that you can read all about many of these ideas in the blog called Gleaning the Field. You can find it at gleaningthefield.org, or you can click on some of the posts within the slides and you can get to specific ideas that I've mentioned. And finally, if any of these ideas are interesting to you, I encourage you to look into other opportunities to learn more, such as the National Children and Youth Garden Symposium, which is coming up in July. And it's just $40 for access to 3 days of really great speakers and lots of great ideas for all things kids and gardening. If you have any questions, you are welcome to contact me. Here is my information. You can connect on Instagram or on WordPress. You also can email me at schoolgardensforlearning@gmail.com. And again, my name is Carrie Strohl, and I thank you for participating today or being interested in this topic. Have fun gardening with kids.